Thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to come along to Warsaw, to be able to speak, and indeed to be the first speaker to open the conference. Boy, I better be good. And I'm going to be speaking actually about a number of different challenges that have arisen probably over the last 2 years that have influenced the way some of yourselves and our peers are thinking about this particular space. There's some of my contact details up on the screen behind me, and if you're any Twitter, who's a Twitter user in the room? Who uses Twitter? Quick show of hands. Twitter? Yeah, 5 of you. Well done. 5. Who's a Facebook user? Ah, look at that. See, that's what a windswept, cosmopolitan, and interesting audience you are. Bravo. Who's not on Facebook? See, they're proud hands. They're very proud hands. Yeah, come on. They're proud hands going up. And that's interesting, actually, because you work with young people and children and families who are steeped in this stuff. And when we say we're not on Facebook, actually what we mean to say is probably we don't have a Facebook account. That's not mean to say that people aren't talking about you, how good you are at your job, how fantastic you are as a teacher, what a great person, wasn't she in a bad mood today? All of those things that children talk about, you know, are all part and parcel because technology is threaded through all of our lives. And also, too, we're all users of technology. Very often, we talk about parents. The parents who are sending their children to school now are the parents who are part of the vanguard of this technological revolution. They're steeped in it too. Unfortunately, they're bringing with them some legacy behaviors and messages that are modeling those behaviors around their own children. And so that's what I'm going to talk about, because whilst in most of these conferences, we talk about the high level, high impact, obviously awful things around grooming, around online sexual predation, around self-harm, around sexting itself, around all of those things that we talk about. Actually, I think there's an underlying problem that whilst those things are high impact and dangerous, in real terms, they're relatively infrequent in terms that they don't affect the bulk of people who use technology. And there's been a developing trend to miss out on some of the insidious effects on broader mental health and well-being that we're beginning to pick up now across a lot of different issues. And they're all interrelated. They all start from this base level. Many of those things we've talked about emanate from young people's use and around their own mental and indeed physical health. So I'm going to focus on those particular things and perhaps talk about some things that might shape how we teach this. My colleague David Wright was here last year, I think, and came along and spoke and talked about a whole range of different challenges. And I'm going to revisit some of those, but I'm going to leave you with some resources and some new ideas that might help, okay? So over that period of a year since he was here last, we've been working on exactly this area as part of the UK Council for Child Internet Safety, the UK Safer Internet Centre, and indeed Southwest Grid for Learning. Because I think we do have a problem. When we begin to see headlines in the newspapers that aren't just focusing on grooming, predation, but around these sort of things, and I've put blue whale at the center of that because it's part and parcel of why that particular issue rose, you can see that perhaps we do have an issue. It's interesting that there was an interesting piece of research done by the Royal Society for Public Health within the UK about 6 months ago. And what they did was they looked at the impact of some of the social media platforms on the direct mental health and well-being of those users. And it was, in fact, a teen group. And I'm just going to have a quick look at some of these. I don't know whether you've seen these. It's interesting to look at them. It covered, of course, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram. And there may very well be users. Is anyone a Snapchat user here? Great. You're the sexters, of course. There's Instagram users. See a few more. Okay, so let's just have a look what the impact of these. So if you can see in each of these infographics, we've divided positive behaviors on this side with negative behaviors on this side. That's the one for YouTube. And YouTube actually came out best in terms of mental health. Its overall average weighted score was that most people's interaction with YouTube is positive in those particular areas around awareness, access, emotional support, around depression and loneliness, in building those things. The one thing it did impact most of all is sleep, because young people gravitate towards YouTube and watch and watch and watch and binge watch. That's obvious. But on those areas around things like body image and real-world relationships and bullying, there were, and fear of missing out, those pressures to engage. That's because I think YouTube, whilst you can post content, has a small contact effect. You can speak to people on YouTube, but most people don't, because it turns into a big argument straight away. And so most people avoid that. You know, you've seen these arguments. They're called flaming. Are you familiar with this idea of flaming? You know, all it takes is one person to say, I don't like this video. Next line down, somebody wants to kill your mother. You know, it gets out of hand that quickly. But when we build away from content and start building in contactable mechanisms within it, we begin to see it shift. We begin to see the negative. This is the one for Twitter. We can begin to see the negative build up. I'm going to hop through these quickly. Twitter still has an average weighted score that's only just negative. But when we go through in Facebook, we begin to see the number of bars appear on the negative side. We scroll through to Snapchat, and that's a very, very different image. We go through to Instagram, and that came out with the lowest average weighted score in the negative. And I think there's a number of things to think about in this. We've seen a disaggregation of what children use online. So a broader palette of creativity, a broader palette of choice that has developed a set of different contexts. People don't just use one platform anymore. They use lots and lots, depending on the context. And the context is what audience they want to speak to, through what medium, and through what set of behaviors. And that has changed and made it difficult for us, I think, to be able to provide the right, certainly technical intervention. Do you remember the old advice used to be, well, be a friend with your child on Facebook? Well, what if they're using all of these different things, all of these different platforms, like we do, for different things? So what's changed? I think a lot has changed massively. These messages that David shared with you last year, whilst they look good on the outset, I don't think resonate with children and young people. Children and young people may be able to shout back the messages themselves when you ask them, you know, what's good behavior online? They'll probably shout these back. But do they impact at all on the culture and what we're actually seeing on the ground? Very little. They don't even resonate with us, let alone children and young people. You know, don't post private information online. We have down the side here. That's what it's all about. It is about sharing. And if you are a burgeoning, developing teen, you are going to want to be able to discover your own sociality, find your way into different groups. Sometimes those groups will be bad. Do you remember your mum or dad when you were young saying, don't hang out with the bad people, oh, they're in with a bad crowd? You know, you learned that both in the physical world and online. And to not just your own sociality, but your sexuality as well. You might want to be trying things as your own sexual experiences develop through those things. That's not to say that's a bad thing, because that's what people have always done. We did. We just didn't do it online. So providing the right advice that's going to shape the right outcomes needs a lot more sophistication than some of these messages here. One of the ones I think that's the most difficult is this whole idea of stand up to bullying. We say that so often, be an upstander. But if you're not providing people with the right information, advice, and strategies and mechanisms to do that, that's a really hard thing, you know? You do not expect a child to go wading into a big fight, stand there and say, hey, stop that, you. They're going to be the first one punched. of course. So you've got to find the right strategies and mechanisms, adding sophistication to that broader message too. So what's changed to influence some of this? So over the last 2 years, and perhaps a little bit longer, we've seen significant changes. So the choice, we've talked about that, has gone from just a limited choice around to a broad and wide choice of whatever you can do. There's this word called amplification. It's this whole idea that rather than go to one central thing, you actually pick various apps that you can then smash together to achieve the outcome. So, you know, for example, you might take a picture with one app, you might photo edit in another, you might publish it through another, and then you might respond and regenerate messages and form social groups around that content with another app. That idea of app smashing. Behavior, therefore, because of this, behavior that was once simple has now become sophisticated. Privacy has moved away from being manageable. Hence that old message, go and look at your privacy settings. Actually, privacy settings on many of the newer apps don't exist. They were designed to be openly and socially transparent. That's how they make their money. That's how their business model works. So managing your privacy suddenly becomes something about not relying on a company to protect you, but actually your own behavior, what you do, how you share it, when, and with whom. And that's a very, very different conversation. The thinking you can go back to a set of software, adjust the privacy settings, and think you're going to be okay. Connection has been really interesting. Connection used to be finite. You used to plug in or pick up the Wi-Fi at home. Now, connection seems to be constant. How many of you, just quickly around the room, how many of you have a phone that you consider to be a smart phone? Okay, a smart device. Quick show of hands. Don't be shy, it's okay. We're filming this, it'll be on the telly later. Okay? Is there anyone, now here's a chance for you to own up. Is there anybody who's got a phone that definitely isn't a smartphone? Come on, oh, well done, madam, thank you. Well done. Hello, my name is Ken and I'm a Nokia user. Is it a Nokia, by the way? Is it a Nokia phone? No, but it's not a smartphone. No. Well, you can rest assured, all of these people in this room who are very smug now thinking, ha, she hasn't got us. You have the most secure device in the room. It's great. You could leave that phone anywhere. Nobody would steal that phone, without a shadow of a doubt. You're safe. It's a good choice. So all of those of us with smartphones, how many of you actually turn them off at night? I mean, properly turn them off. That's not many of you, consider you've all got one. That's about 6 people. So that means that this idea of our access and on our constant, we are always, do you know that question we used to ask children? How long do you spend on the internet? That's blown out the water. We're connected 24/7. And if our phone is on, somebody knows where we are. The biggest amount of privacy data that's bled away from us is around geolocation. And if somebody knows where we are, then, you know, our phone is always with us, then somebody always knows where we are all the time. Sociality has become selective and now transparent. So whereas you used to have friends that you only know, it's now broad. And a lot of commercial applications are building on that too. Access, fixed, mobile. Most of the content young people, and indeed many of us access now, is through 3G and 4G. So if you're a school who's providing filtered internet connection to keep your children safe, when they actually either leave your school premises or are out in the playground, they're getting better, faster, unfiltered, unmoderated, unsupervised internet connection than you can provide as a school. And it's a problem. How do we actually monitor within those spaces too? Criticality is interesting. Young people will make judgments around content, not based on what it says, but what it looks like. If it looks professional, if it looks Hollywood-style production, then it must be true. And don't radicalizing groups like IS and the far right know this. Their materials now are not some shaky video in a cave. They are top quality Hollywood productions because they know that has a better and bigger impact on the veracity and truthfulness of content. The demography used to be narrow. We used to think about teens and mobiles. The biggest uptake in the UK around technology is 3 and 4-year-olds. That has gone from 0 to 16% who own their own devices over the last 2 years. 3 and 4-year-olds. They are the ones who are adopting technology now. And the environment, as some of you will find out later on, is moving from these flat screens into completely, fully immersive environments. It's no accident that Facebook have bought Oculus Rift. Because what do they want to do? They want to create a completely immersive social experience. Think about that. Dropping a child into an environment where everything looks real. And the interactions are a lot more real. What do we need to change? We need to adjust our education. We need to look at education at the moment, which tends to be fragmented and sporadic, into building it, a wider literacy into what we do. It needs to build on previous knowledge. So therefore, it needs to become part and parcel of the important roles that we have. It needs to be prioritized as an important role because it directly impacts on children and young people. The focus needs to move away from technology around behavior. This has nothing to do with people who just use technology. We all do, and if we all do, then it's part and parcel of human behavior. And that means that those people who are technically able are not the ones necessarily to lead. They might be the ones who can advise and shape some of that stuff, but actually it involves everyone. If we're all users, the ownership should be all of us. Young people's voice in this is really important. Very often, adults shape programs for young people and then are surprised when they don't work sometimes. If we're talking about these particular aspects of young people's lives, young people need to be at the heart of it, both in managing it and both in delivering it, both in experiencing it and both in forming the development of those curriculums. Families have been mentioned a number of different times here too. Families currently at the moment are said to be uninformed. Do you know, to a certain degree they are, but it's less than uninformed. They're building, they're modeling and bringing a whole set of practices and behaviors that were normal through their own use of technology when they were young and modeling them directly in front of children and young people. It's no surprise that 3 and 4-year-olds are the biggest adopters of technology when the rest of the household are modeling all those behaviors around them. Professionals too, like ourselves, whilst this is no longer an argument to say, well, I don't understand technology, this has nothing to do with me, it's not my bag. If it impacts on the safety and well-being of children, then it needs to be part and parcel of our training. Within the UK now, all professionals are required to receive annual safeguarding training that includes these particular aspects of online safety. And I guess probably it's the same here too. Industry has a role, I think, in being able to look at and re-examine its business models. Very often this commercial model about offering everything for free and then just sucking all of that data back is immoral. These features need to change. They need to be built into the software by design. It's not enough just to build it onto your corporate responsibility. There needs to be wider thinking around how these things impact, particularly on children and young people. And perhaps the most insidious part of this is the concept of the like button. We're all familiar with the like button on Facebook and all of those others. Lots and lots have them. That particular button maximizes on human potential and the way humans have developed. It sits at the very heart of how we engage with people. When you see something or post something, it's really important to like it if you want to maintain those things, because that's what we've grown up with in 20,000 years of human social evolution. That's what we've done. And yet the like button isn't about just liking. If you didn't post anything on any of those social networks but just like content, it shapes what you see. And it shapes, because it's built on the algorithms that are commercial. It pushes that content. The like button and the use of the like button, I think, is an important component of that education. And we've seen the effects of what the like button can do when we've seen huge regime change happen in places like the UK with Brexit and within the US in government. When those particular like buttons are pressed, that sends enough data to be able to influence that 2% shift that matters. So thinking around those sort of things, they're not there by accident, they're crafted to do exactly that. And so that means moving from a culture that is better than safer. It talks about better use. It's not just about safe use. Try to talk to safety to children and young people. They switch off. Who wants to be safe? And putting up rules about it doesn't work. If you walked into your classroom and put a note on the board and said, whatever you do, don't press this button. Don't ever press this button over here. You're guaranteed that as soon as you've left the room, someone will walk up and give it a shove, because that's what kids do. Moving from a safer to a better idea means having the right sort of conversations. So we've begun to work on that. We've begun to look at how we can begin to match some of this differentiation into the online safety messages that we give. So across these age ranges, you would expect your education to increase with breadth and complexity. But we've also shifted the focus. When you're very young, you do focus on yourself. This almost follows like a social and emotional learning development, where you start off around self-awareness, self-management, then you move into social awareness and social management. As you begin to get older, you're looking at the impact of what you do, not only on yourself and your own well-being, but also on those immediately around you. And then that moves, as you grow, into the wider social group to which you belong. That could be your school, your family, your immediate social group, your football team, your faith group, and how it impacts on those. And then by the time we get up to that older age range, we're talking about how the impact of what you do influences society. So based on that particular model and those particular focuses, we did a quick landscape survey. When I say we, I mean Southwest Grid for Learning, UK Safer Internet Centre, and the United Kingdom Council for Child Internet Safety. Did a landscape survey and looked at all of the features that were out there. And there were a lot. And we developed a framework that is based around these strands. These strands, if you've seen them before, are based around a set of scope and progressions from Common Sense Media in the US, but we've tweaked and adjusted them. They are around all those things we've talked about, around self-image and identity, who you are, how the internet shapes who you are, what influences you too. Around relationships and communications, how to build positive relationships online that are empowering and allow you to flourish, and how to deal and build resilience around issues when they happen, because life is life, and life is life online too. It's those particular things. We talk about that thing that many of us talk about, how you build up this trail behind you around your own reputation. We focus on bullying. We focus very clearly on how to develop a set of criticality and a set of critical skills around what you're viewing that help in tackling things around fake news, propaganda, etc., and that idea of the echo chamber or the information bubble. We look at privacy in a true sense and the security around that. If you're living in an environment that is openly, socially transparent and non-private, how do you begin to craft strategies to be able to develop privacy within there? And finally, we look at the stuff around ownership, who owns what, and how you protect your own stuff too. We developed a framework that is focused around those things. Sorry, it's just hopping all over the place. That's not very clear, I know, but this is one strand that runs through self-image and identity. I don't know whether you can read that, so I'll go on to one of the other strands quickly. You can see across the top we have those 4 bands around those age groups, and there's shifting around those bands, so depending where you are developmentally, this is one strand around self-image and identity, and there's the maturity level across the top. If we dive into one of those around digital health and well-being, is that a little bit clearer? Can you read some of that? It starts off very clearly with children, with very young children, around talking about the rules and about rules that keep us safe, and that developing those rules around using technology and giving some examples, and then moving through, I can talk about simple guidance for using technology. By the time we move into that green section, remember, which is about 7 to 11, we're talking about concepts around thinking about how technology directly impacts on me and identifying the times when you are engaging with technology too much, and that's something that we do. How many of you have watched, do any of you watch Netflix or anything like that? Yeah. I'll be honest, how many of you have binge watched? Do you know what I mean by binge watched? I mean not coming away from it, just watching episode after episode. It gets to 3 o'clock in the morning. You think, I know I've got work tomorrow, but I'm on the 5th series of Breaking Bad. I've watched Breaking Bad on a new telly, all of it in one go. I looked like I'd been on crystal meth when I'd finished it. I had no eyes, I was tired, I couldn't move. And so binge, and young people do that, identifying those things too. When we move on to the blue section here, we're talking about older concepts around actually thinking about the pressures that affect us online. And it talks about those things about like, hello, microwave's done. Yes. And then finally, by the time we get to the older group, we're talking about the effects and the impacts of some of those things around age verification, what's legal, what's ethical, etc. All of those things are supported through a whole set of assessment resources. I've finished, but you can have this presentation. And we're also developing a mechanism to be able to deliver those things. This will be available online in a few weeks at the UK Council for Child Internet Safety website. I'm afraid I've run out of time. Dziękuję bardzo, miło mi. Thank you very much.